Alrighty, so we're going to be looking today at the interplay of energy systems. Here we go. Alright, the interplay of energy systems. Now, we need to remember, of course, that the word interplay is about how things work together. Okay, how they work together to produce energy in this case, or we talk about ATP resynthesis. Now, we need to remember that there are three energy systems. The first one being the ATP-CP system, then the lactic acid system, and thirdly, of course, the aerobic system. Now, all three of these systems work together. So at any one time, we may be sitting around like we are right now, and one of the systems is working more to produce ATP for us than the others. So the aerobic system is dominant. However, in the background, we've also got the ATP-CP system and the lactic acid system producing some of our ATP. So a minimum of 5% at any one time. So the aerobic system might be producing 90% of our ATP stores right now, but the ATP-CP system and lactic acid systems are helping with 10%, 5% each. We need to remember that the ATP-CP system is an anaerobic system, doesn't require oxygen, and is for high intensity efforts, 90 to 95% of our heart rate max, and for a short duration. This is because it's fueled by the creatine phosphate, and we only have limited stores of this in our muscles. So once it runs out, we can no longer use that as a dominant system. The lactic acid system is also used for high intensity activities, but for repeated high intensity actions. So we're looking at 85% plus of our heart rate max here, but for activities that we repeat over and over. They do have a short duration though, these activities. They may be 10 to 30 seconds, so not very long, and it might be something that we have to work hard and then we get a short rest and then we have to work hard again. Remember though that the ATP-CP system, because of the stores, there's only up to 10 seconds worth of creatine phosphate that we can use to produce or to resynthesize ATP here. Then, of course, we have the aerobic system, which does use oxygen, unlike the other two, which work without the presence of oxygen. Aerobic energy system is dominant when we are doing moderate intensity activities, so under 85% of our heart rate max. It's also for activities that generally go longer than 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So we can call these prolonged activities. And we also know that the aerobic system is really dominant when we are in our recovery mode. So when we are getting a break in the play, a break between quarters, or when the ball isn't near where we are and we get to have a bit of a rest. So remembering they all work together, but depending on the activity that we are doing, one of them is more dominant than the other. So we're going to use this graph here to explain the contribution of each of the energy systems and how much and when they contribute to our ATP resynthesis or our energy production. Oh, the other thing to remember is that our ATP-CP stores take about 3 to 5 minutes to replenish. And we also need to, of course, remember that the lactic acid system has a byproduct of lactic acid, which when that builds up in our muscles, we feel a sense of fatigue, and the only way to remove this is to reduce our intensity and get more oxygen into our body and use the aerobic system to help clear that. So back to our graph now. So you can see along the bottom is time. So we would be starting with 0, and then we're moving along towards the game, and on the side is our maximum rate of energy production. So ATP-CP system is at its maximum at very early on in the game, but it goes down very quickly because we know we don't have very big stores of the ATP, of the creatine phosphate that fuels this system. We've only got enough to fuel about 10 seconds of high intensity activity. The lactic acid system here in the red, it doesn't produce its most ATP early on because it knows that the ATP-CP system will take over that. So a little bit further in to the game, so 10 seconds in, we're talking here, 10 seconds into the movement is when the lactic acid system generally will be dominant. Again, that does have to reduce relatively quickly because if we rely on the lactic acid system for too long, we get that build-up of lactic acid that does impact on our performance. Of course, we need to remember that at the better trained we are, the higher OBLA we have, and the later in intensity that lactic acid build-up happens. Aerobic is producing most of its energy later on in the game, so as time goes on, because it's prolonged activity, and so it's after that 30 seconds mark where it's producing the most of our energy production. So you can see that as the game goes along, the aerobic system is becoming more dominant, and the other two systems have stopped contributing quite so much. So this is the interplay of energy systems. Some keywords related to that. It's important to remember that in these games we've got varying intensities. Therefore, there are different fuel stores that are fueling our energy systems. So the ATP-CP system is fueled by creatine phosphate. Aerobic system requires oxygen and glycogen. But they also have byproducts, and sometimes those byproducts do impact on our performance, like lactic acid. We also need to think about recovery, and we want to talk about which system is more dominant than the other. So for example, if I'm going to talk about netball, at the start of the quarter, I would be getting most of my energy production from the ATP-CP system when the ball first comes to me down my end. So I'm a defender in the goal defence, in the defensive half. First high intensity effort will potentially use up all of my creatine phosphate stores, and that needs some time to recover. The next time the ball comes to me, another high intensity effort, the lactic acid system will be dominant, right? And then it might happen again and again. It keeps coming back down my end. Every time the ball comes back down my end, I'm using the lactic acid system as the dominant system to fuel my energy production. When the ball is down the other end, and I'm in a bit of mini recovery, and I'm only working at a lower intensity, the aerobic system is working to supply my ATP and also to help clear those byproducts from the lactic acid system. So when the ball is not where I am, then I may be in a period of recovery, albeit a very short one, and then the ball comes back again and I'm using my high intensity efforts, therefore the dominant system would be the lactic acid system. As the game progresses, as the quarter goes on, maybe my ATP-CP stores have recovered enough to provide me with some energy to make a high intensity effort, but realistically I have to wait until the quarter break to get a full recovery to be able to get these stores ready to go again. So we would have that break. In that quarter recovery, I'm focusing on the aerobic system providing most of my energy to recover, and then when we start again, the ATP-CP system and the lactic acid system are helping to fuel my high intensity efforts throughout the game. So always remembering to talk about which system is most dominant depending on the intensity of the activities that you're doing, but also considering what fuel stores you have available and what byproducts are being produced.